Hello, everybody. My name is Carl Bouchard. I am the French Language Services Commissioner of Ontario. Right away, I would like to recognize that we are in the Ontario Legislative Assembly building, which is situated on traditional Indigenous territories of many nations, including the Mississauga, the Quedet, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat, and there are many other nations in this territory now, Indigenous and Métis. Thank you. Imagine this. You are a Francophone mother, and the worst thing that can happen to you has happened to you. Your child dies tragically in a car accident. And you have to deal with the Ontario Coroner's Office, but no one speaks to you in French. No one informs you of your language rights. You're afraid to request services in French because you know that you don't even know if it's possible, and you don't want to offend anybody. The rare times when people speak to you in French, it's through interpreters, which causes delays. You can manage in English, so you agree to continue, in spite of yourself, to continue in English in order to move forward with your file. You have to deal with the emotional impact of the situation, connect with your family, and figure out what to do with information that you only partially understand. What I'm telling you is the true story of a Francophone mother from Northern Ontario who contacted us. It was our intervention that resulted in the mother being able to obtain services in French and understand what she had to do. She said to us, it's not easy to translate all the words. I speak some English, but in situations like that, I have a lot of trouble being able to make myself understood because it's very emotional. It also affects the other members of the family who are put aside because we can't have letters in French. Following our intervention, both written and verbal communications between the coroner's office and the mother took place in French. The Ontario Coroner's Office, which is subject to the French Language Services Act, also undertook an analysis of the bilingual capacity of its staff across the province and reviewed its offers of French language services across the province for families and the general public. This is just one example of the results that we have obtained for Francophones who come to help to ask our help, thanks to our complaint resolution system. In my 24-25 report, we have many other cases that we resolved and that have had a real impact on the daily lives of Francophones. I'm thinking of the case of a new mother who contacted us after receiving her 3-month-old daughter's health card, whose name did not have the 2 dots over the I that it was supposed to have. She was replied to in English only and was only received French communications with our help, like the sign at the entry of Mattawa on Ontario Highway Centre, or the sign indicating the directions to a cemetery in Alban in the district of Sudbury, or the construction project for Metrolinx and the need to include French versions of signage. Thanks to our intervention, these cases were resolved. For example, the extension of the metro line towards Scarborough. I was also thinking about the selection of juries by the Ministry of the Attorney General that used only an English-only email address until we intervened, which led to the use of a bilingual email address. And we've also dealt with long-standing problems. For example, with regard to the Ontario Fire Code, which was available only in English since it was adopted in 1981. But following our intervention through a complaint, has finally been translated and is now available in French. It entered into effect in January, will enter into effect in January 2026. We also contribute to the efforts of Ontario's Francophones to access French language services that are important to them. For example, in 2023, we received 115 complaints about the province's refusal to fund the University of Sudbury, a university designated under the French Language Services Act, which jeopardize the ability to comply with its language obligations. Thanks to our efforts, we put the university back on the path to conformity. The university established relationships with other post-secondary institutions and has received funding from the Ministry of Colleges, Universities, Research Excellence and Security. These resolutions have made a real difference in the lives of Ontario's francophones. So I'm very proud of this report, which again focuses on the concrete results we are achieving to improve services in French in Ontario and to ensure compliance with the French Language Services Act. Our work not only has a direct effect on the lives of people, but it also has a positive impact on the whole of government by raising the profile of French language services and ensuring that the issue of respecting the rights of francophones is regularly considered and discussed at all Ontario government agencies. I would like to thank all those who have contacted us, who have placed their trust in us, and who have allowed us to resolve issues that directly affected them, their communities, and often the francophones all over Ontario. These results our rigorous fact-finding processes, our relationships of trust we have established with the public and with the institutions that are subject to our jurisdiction have allowed us to improve, continue to improve services in French. With regard to the government's outside advertisement, where the government was violating the law by only publishing in English. To address that situation, I recommended to the Cabinet Office to produce bilingual information to allow for bilingual communication at the same time in English and French. My recommendation is still under review by the Cabinet Office. In the meantime, the challenges remain. I will therefore continue to urge the government to respect its language obligations in this regard. In my annual report, I also come back to the Francophone daycares that are required to offer services in French. Last year, we reported on the case of a Francophone daycare that had announced the closure of one of its branches. Our analysis identified gaps in the daycare's knowledge of its language obligations and in the role of the daycare and the role of the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Francophone Affairs with regard to guaranteeing language rights. I have asked the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Francophone Affairs to remedy this situation in order to ensure that designated daycares are aware of and comply with their obligations. This is a critical issue to continue to monitor our their compliance with the Act. I will conclude by my remarks by speaking about the recommendation I'm making this year with regard to the implementation of services according to the law. There is a regulation under the Act that allows certain services to be exempted from language obligations in limited cases. There have been a number of cases since 2019 where services have been denied wrongly. There should have been French language service available. I think, for example, of a public consultation on the creation of a public transit, or according to the justification for some of these exemptions, we were often told that it was cost and cost of a translation. Respect for language rights should not depend on cost or the lack of flexibility in the administration. With regards to this, something was reminded or mentioned in the Montfort Hospital case before the Court of Appeal in 2001. There is no guidance with regard to these exemptions. It is very incoherent, and this threatens Francophone rights. This is why I recommend that the Ministry of Francophone Affairs establish a framework with clear parameters to support organizations subject to the French Language Services Act when exemptions are being considered. That said, in my opinion, we must also aim to protect and increase French language services, not the reverse. Thank you very much for your attention. I will now be able to answer your questions. do you believe that have there been other abuses, cases of exemptions? Were you surprised by the response from the ministry with regard to government institutions and agencies and your use of French language services? I think we try to ensure the application of the French Language Services Act, which was modernized recently. But I think with regard to exemptions, it's very important to provide a framework for this and to not deprive the public of the information that it is entitled to in French. I think there should be things where there are public consultations. There is no opportunity for Francophones to get expert information. This is a way of depriving Francophones of information. We have to we view these commitments, but with regard to this. What was your reaction as a commissioner? I made the recommendation in the report that there should be no more exemptions. There should be no more cases. With regard to the number of whether there are more complaints with regard to French language services than last year, I think the quality of the cases is very important. What I mentioned in my presentation and in my report is that the cases that we took up had a direct effect on the ability of Francophones to live in French in Ontario, to understand information, areas of public safety, highways, public safety, and interventions, for example, the contacts with the coroner's office. I think that there should be more efforts, but I think that the quality of the cases that we've taken up has helped many Francophones across Ontario, and I've publicized these efforts. I've traveled a great deal around Ontario to deal directly with the population, Francophone population, and with ministers and ministries. And you said that the government justifies exemptions, saying there's not enough resources, personnel. Have you dealt with that? And are there enough resources, enough personnel for Francophone services? This is a question that the government of Ontario must answer, but I think we must prioritize resources in the right areas and the right training for people to provide Francophone services. And I've already highlighted that in my 2019-20 report, why I called for a plan for French language services. I have been told that these plans have been defined and created, and I would like to have clarifications on that regard, and with a view to meeting our obligation. An obligation is not just a suggestion, and there are exemptions. Is there cases where this is the translation into French, or the translation comes too late? Translation was not always equivalent, and when we provided translation, sometimes the translation was just a summary of a complete document, and I think so that the service is not equivalent in English and French. So I think this can sometimes lead to decisions lacking information or based on insufficient information, but I think there should be no difference in the services offered in French and in English. So we have to ensure that the government, when there are exemptions, there should really be a justified choice. With regard to the Laurentian University, with regard to the failings or in the Language Services Act, French Language Services Act, and what is the government's reaction? How has the government implemented the recommendations? I see there's progress, and my report last year, I did an update, and I referred to Laurentian University that had received decision-making powers to deal with questions or issues that might have an effect on Francophone services, but We only close a recommendation or cancel a recommendation when I am satisfied that they've had the desired effect and services are available. With regard to Laurentian, in my last report, we stressed the collaboration and an open dialogue that must exist between the ministries responsible for Laurentian and the institution itself. For example, the standardized terms so that things are clear for the public and what services are involved. These are things that are very important, and there has to be a great deal of thought given to anything that's done, and we have to ensure that there is not any repeat of these failings, and this is something that I've put in the public report. Right now, you're not satisfied with the progress made. So when I close a recommendation, I am satisfied that the result has ensured that the situation will not be repeated and solutions have been found. That doesn't mean that I'm satisfied with all progress that's made. Sometimes I think there are cases where progress is made very quickly. For example, my report last year, I mentioned a recommendation with regard to bilingual material, which is still being studied by the Cabinet Office. In the meantime, the Francophones do not have the information they need. So when I make a recommendation, when I close a recommendation, it means that action is being taken. So there is an obligation and there is work to be done. We have to understand that public administration has responsibilities for governing correctly and taking into account a number of factors to put forward recommendations that will allow for full implementation of these rights. So there's work to be done, but I think that things will go quickly. But there is a recommendation that you made in this report. Is there any follow-up? Well, I hope so, because it's in the interest of all Francophones in Ontario to ensure that services available to Francophones be available. And when there is less service available, I think we must take that situation very seriously. Our report was submitted to the legislature this morning, and I hope that the ministers concerned will read it and take action. With regard to your report and then the responses from the various ministries concerned, we have good relationships with the Ministry of Francophone Affairs, and that is responsible for the French Language Services Act and its implementation. So it's very important to communicate where there are challenges. We have to be able to talk to each other. So sometimes when there's solutions proposed, we've already discussed these solutions with the ministries, and I would expect formal commitments from the ministries concerned. And if you look at our report, our investigative report, there are recommendations to the ministries, but it will be up to the Ministry of Francophone Affairs to reply to this issue, whether they accept the recommendation or not. I hope they will. And with regard to with regard to Francophone organization, I'm happy to see that in an interview, the Minister Mulroney identified the repertory as a very important project, and I see that there is progress with regard to the Ministry of Francophone Affairs in the analysis necessary to implement an important repertory of Frank language services, and I'm working with the follow-up team to ensure the creation of a team for follow-up. And why did I raise the issue of the repository? Because often I go to meetings in communities and they come and ask us questions about their language rights. They need information, and can we make complaints? Do we have the right to these services? Can we make a complaint about it? And so people have to know where what their rights are and where they can find them in writing. And this is very important. There are very easy digital ways of identifying areas we can identify services in French in a minority environment where
French is not an official language of Ontario. So we have to inform Francophone Ontarians of their rights. Otherwise, there will be no progress. When you were talking about the spelling, for example, putting the two dots above an I in French, but at ministry level, has there been any progress? The important thing is that we can resolve cases. We've had more than 2,000 cases we've resolved. I've been the commissioner since 2020, and so since we've started publishing our reports, we've increased our resolution of cases. Why? Because there's more information, and there are ministries and other stakeholders that are at the table to find solutions. So when we work together, we are working for Francophones. I would expect a lot more proactive action, not just reaction to complaints. Once everyone is aware of their responsibilities and rights should be met before or without having to make a complaint. So we have to educate the public service with regard to its obligations for language rights. So education is very important. In the report, you say that I wonder why there's cases that are, the number of cases have been resolved. Sometimes it takes time to resolve the various cases that we're dealing with. But we take the issue of Francophone rights very seriously, and we have to continue to improve French language services. We want to do something for current and future generations. So when we know that there is the Francophone services are necessary, we want to send the message now, a positive message that services are available, should be available. But we also have to, when we have to use critical services, I think the need to have Francophone services available is very important. And it's only then that I will be satisfied with the service available. If the situation there have been other cases that may have come up, and when I'm in an office where I can react and deal with a specific case, I think the person at the center of any complaint, it's their experience with regard to their language rights that is important, and I think that Francophones, in the meantime, when they don't get the services they need or have a right to, and don't get a rapid resolution, I think that the end result is that the Francophone should be able to succeed in receiving their French language services, and in ensuring that in the future it will be able, the French language services will be available, and will be and people will be aware of their rights. I think that the various cases are often complex because the Act touches or deals with many situations. You have to take into many factors, and this is part of the work that we do, and we have to ensure that people are aware that we are a service that they can trust and that can help them. With regard to the report, have you noticed any improvements in language services offered, and or is there areas that need to be improved? Well, access to justice in French, and of course, this is a case where Francophones are very vulnerable, just like health or daycares. So often we find ourselves in situations where justice in French is difficult, and we often deal with tribunals. There's the stress, ignorance of the system, and it's in our interest to ensure that we have close links with the organizations that we have a jurisdiction over. And I was talking about the selection of juries. For example, when you receive a letter in English that you're called for jury duty, and it's difficult to know if these people in these institutions can work in French. And with regard to rentals, for example, for tenants, there is a lack of French services. So this is a limit on our rights. And I think that we have many partners that are around the table who are very proactive. For example, if we take the case of the Ontario Tribunal in Ontario, and the increase in the number of arbitrators that can function in French, that's a positive step, and that helps us to improve our capacity for offering French services. So there, of course, there's a lot of work to do, but what we do is a long-term work with other solution partners to find solutions. With regard to complaints to Elections Ontario, have there been any differences with regard to other elections or other years? Any improvements? What I can say is that the same challenges come back. There are some situations, and we have to remember the context. The elections are one day, and there are a number of people that are in the electoral in the offices, and this is it's difficult to recruit and train people to provide French services. And so the situation is not that's satisfying, but I'm aware of the difficulty when it comes to recruiting and retaining staff, because often this is something that can make a difference in people's lives, but that doesn't mean that since we're a minority, it's difficult to find Francophones, but I think that we have to make an effort to ensure training, and we have to be innovative and creative. And I think there have been improvements, and the capacity of Ontario to provide French language services, and I think there is a goodwill to serve Francophones correctly, and I think we can continue to meet our objectives. With regard to Service Ontario, can you say, have there been any preliminary consultations? Well, I will start with cases that we are that are away. I'm not going to name them, but we are going to study ministries and the documentation available, and of course it's the first the frontline services for Francophones. We interview people who are offering these services, who manage the offices, who work at the ministry, and we also travel to various areas, various locations to study how they work. So our work is very extensive, and I'm very hopeful that we will soon be able to publish a report with regard to improving services in French. So our inquiries are very important, and they're important for people's daily lives, and we have to remind them of their obligations, and we can make recommendations with regard to improving French language services for the benefit of all Francophones in Ontario. So, of course, we're working very hard, and but I hope that will lead to real results. I'm not giving any calendar for inquiries, because I want the work to be done properly before we make a recommendation. But of course, we're trying to be quick and effective and efficient. But I think, do you have any other? Are there any other unilingual texts, for example? I think this is something very important, and for people who aren't familiar with the fire code, it's a very a big document which is regularly updated, and that's why, thanks to our efforts, it's now available in French. And over time, we will continue to update it, and we will ensure that there is translation. And with regard to Ontario laws, regulations are not required to be in English and French. It's up to the Attorney General's office, and so when we see that there is goodwill with regard to providing francophones with information in English and French. For me, it's not just goodwill, it's an obligation. But we continue to work with our partners in the public service to ensure that our recommendations are met. Are there any questions on the phone? No? Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our press conference. Thank you for being here and for asking your questions, and thank you for being here in person. Goodbye.